like the pharaohs who built the pyramids. Ithra will be the pyramid of Saudi Arabia.
للتعبير عن وطننا وثقافتنا وإبداعاتنا بعقول سعودية وقدرات محلية وتعاون عالمي.
We explore and we tell stories about what we find when we explore. Those to me are the two things that human beings do.
على المركز أنه إن شاء الله سيثري الجو الثقافي في المملكة العربية السعودية.
أن نستمع إلى غيرنا وأن نستفيد منهم وأن نخطط نحن لأنفسنا. أعتقد هذا هو الطريق السليم.
Art is an expression of faith, and I feel that this is an eternal message. It's not something that's for the moment.
نعرف أن التحولات الاقتصادية والاجتماعية إذا لم يسندها ويؤسس لها نهضة ثقافية فنية قد تصيب الإنسان بالقلق وممكن أن تهز من كثير من وجوده الواقعي والحياتي.
I can see how Ithra can be a game changer for Saudi artists, but also the broader public to realize potential.
السعادة مقترنة بالتطوع، ولعل التطوع وسيلة هامة جدا جدا في حياة كل واحد منا إلى تعظيم الأثر الخاص به.
Hello and welcome to the Energy Exhibit, part of King Abdulaziz Center for World Culture. My name is Abdullah Kharsani and I want to welcome you all today to our brand new show. Together, we're going to discover one of the biggest science museums that we have here in our region. Also, we're going to cover some scientific related topic, not only at the Energy Exhibit, but also at Ithra parameter as well. So let me tell you, here's how the show is going to go. We're going to have a weekly live episode at the same day, at the same time. We're going to have some live experiments. We're going to have some scientific demonstrations along the way. Also, some exclusive interviews with Ithra Museum docents and leading experts in the oil and gas industry. But all of that is going to be from later on. Today, I want to talk about the formation of petroleum and the history of Saudi Aramco. Of course, at the end of the episode, we're going to have a Q&A part. So please be ready with your mics on and your cameras. Write down your questions so you guys can participate at the end of the show. But before I start talking about today's topic, I want to share with you the history of this magnificent building that we are in today. So come on, let's get inside. This building did not actually start as an exhibit. It started as a mobile exhibit back in the day. We used to call it Aramco Oil Mobile Exhibit. This exhibit was built by Saudi Aramco in 1987. Next to the Prosperity Well, one of the first oil wells was discovered here in Saudi Arabia that produces oil in commercial capacity. This exhibit showcases the knowledge and the method behind oil exploration journey, but specifically focuses on Aramco's journey. But as I said, today I want to talk about and start talking from the beginning. I want to talk about the formation of oil. So for that, we're going to have to go back in time about 160 million years ago, where everything started. So I hope you guys are ready today. So come on, let's start the journey. So now we're back 160 million years ago underwater. Can you guys see these suspended models above us? These are tiny marine microorganisms. Of course, in real life, they're actually so small we cannot see them in our naked eye. We have to use microscopes in order to see them. And these microorganisms above us are the essence of crude oil. Come on, follow me. Let me show you how they are a big part of forming the crude oil. As you can see, these microorganisms help forming petroleum. So what happens? Petroleum is formed from the remains of these tiny microorganisms that lived millions and millions years ago, even before the Jurassic period. So what happened? When they die, they build up in the earth layer, creating thick deposits, which we call them sediments. And over time, and I'm talking about millions and millions of years, the organic remains of these microorganisms change in forming the crude oil, the petroleum that we are extracting today. So basically, the crude oil, the petroleum that we are extracting today was formed a very long time ago. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of you are asking right now, how come we have this rich deposit of petroleum that we're extracting today? And you guys are actually correct. But the thing is, the Arabian Peninsula wasn't always a desert environment. Come on, follow me and let me show you the history and the geological changes that our planet went through, which might help explain why we have this rich deposit we're extracting today in the Arabian Peninsula at the energy exhibit. So let us imagine together 500 million years ago. I know that's a lot of zeros, but please bear with me. Imagine 500 million years ago, the Arabian Peninsula was covered by a large ice sheet. I mean, it was so cold back then. I can't even imagine how cold the temperature were back then. And then moving on to a different era, 160 million years ago, the Arabian Peninsula and everything that we know today in our country was underwater. Here where tiny creatures used to live, and these tiny microorganisms that I talked about used to live here, which helps explain why we have this rich deposit of petroleum that we are extracting today. So moving on to a different era, 20 million years ago, hot lava were spilling out across the land, especially here in the East Coast. The movement of the earth caused rock plates to shift and fold, trapping the crude oil and the minerals that came out from these volcanic underwater, here underground. Moving on to a different era, the Arabian Peninsula that we know today, for about 1 million years ago, was covered by a vast grassland. Here where all types of animals used to live here back in the day. But as the weather grew a little bit drier, the climate grew a little bit drier, the grassland have eventually died and forming the well-known desert area that we know today. So as we know, as I explained that, the Arabian Peninsula wasn't always a desert environment. It have gone through many stages and many phases before reaching to this well-known desert environment that we know today. So now I want to move on and talk about a different topic. I want to talk about the primitive use of crude oil back in the day. Did you know that people used petroleum even before cars were invented? People have been using petroleum for thousands of years. You see, natural tar, which is asphalt, is a semi-solid form of petroleum. People used to collect it back in the day for various reasons. So we have here a couple of examples, a real-life artifact. For example, petroleum was being used as a fuel for our lamps in the past. If you want to take a look at this artifact that we have, these are real-life artifacts gathered from around the world. These lamps that you guys are seeing, it lit people's houses, brought light to our mosque and other buildings as well. Another example of using petroleum in the past, people have been using petroleum as a glue, gluing parts together to create useful tools for everyday life. Take a look at these examples that we have in here, these displays. As you can see, these these balls that we have, it was carved by rock asphalt. Also the knife on the top, gluing the sharp head of the knife to its handle. These are some of the uses of petroleum in the past. People have been using it as glue, as I said, gluing parts together to create useful tools for everyday life. Another example of the use of petroleum, natural tar. Sailors in the past have been using natural tar to seal up their boats to make them waterproof. This is an example of how the boats in the past, how they looked like in the past. Also, some other examples of uses of petroleum in the past. For example, ancient Egypt, a civilization that lived more than 3,000 years ago. They used natural tar in the mummification process to mummify the bodies. And we still find these bodies today fully intact. But here's something that I want to show you. Speaking of ancient civilization, ancient Sumer, a civilization that lived more than 6,000 years ago. And here we have a bowl, dates back to ancient Sumer. Ancient Sumer, they used natural tar to seal up these bowls to make them waterproof as well. I mean, we're talking about ancient Sumer, a civilization that lived more than 6,000 years ago. This civilization used to rule this part of the land. And here we have in front of you a bowl here at the energy exhibit dates back to that time. So as you can see, petroleum have been used for thousands of years, but no one really back then knew the real value of petroleum. But everything changed for about a century ago when the Industrial Revolution sparked all around the world, and then we knew the real value of petroleum, especially when it comes to the industrial process. It really helps a lot, and all of us saw the outcome of it. Speaking of the outcome, I want to move on and talk about something that we have here in the exhibit. I want to talk about this beautiful car that we have over here. This is a 1954 Dodge pickup truck. The red color, classic color. This car was very common back in the day, especially at Aramco's work site, carrying people and equipment through desert remote areas. And of course, the need for fuel to start and operate the engines of these cars gave us also another reason why we should use petroleum, extracting it and using as a fuel for these cars. For me, this car represents the beginning of the development of the modern world. And it's safe to say that this car indirectly helped shape the modern world that we know today. I mean, this is a really beautiful car, guys. Moving on, I want to talk about a different topic. I want to talk about some of the equipments that geologists used to carry back in the day. And of course, this also zone talks about the history of Aramco. But first, I want to talk about the equipments that geologists used to carry back in the day to help them out in the exploration process. If you want to take a closer look at the display that we have in here, we have some examples. For example, this hammer rock. Geologists used to use this hammer to break up open rocks for further examination. Also, we have a compass on its left side and also hand lenses as well. Here are some other examples of tools that geologists used to carry back in the day as well. We have microscopes over here, and we have some maps. And also we have some binoculars as well over here. So these are some of the tools that geologists used to carry back in the day to help out in the exploration process. Now, I want to talk about a different topic that is related to our topic today. I want to talk about the history of Saudi Aramco, some important dates that is related to Saudi Aramco's history. In 1933, a concession agreement was signed between the Saudi government and a company from California called SoCal, Standard Oil Company. This concession agreement was signed in 1933, allowing SoCal to enter Saudi Arabian soil to help out and assist in the oil exploration process. So for that, SoCal have appointed their own geologist, Max Steinecke, a Stanford graduate and a leading expert when it comes to finding potential oil wells. But as a Stanford graduate and a leading expert, his biggest challenge was to face the Arabian desert. So for that, King Abdulaziz have appointed a Bedouin tribesman, a Saudi, and a long-time employee for Aramco. That gentleman right over there. You want to take a closer look at it? And his name is Khumayis bin Ramthan. So as I said, Khumayis bin Ramthan, a long-time employee for Aramco. He's a gifted guider as well. He had a great knowledge when it comes to the Arabian desert. He also had a great knowledge when it comes to the geography of this country. He also, most importantly, had the skills to navigate through it. He was actually so good. He used to point out distances and locations so accurately. He could have saved weeks, if not even months of work. So Max Steinecke and Khumayis bin Ramthan partnered together and started the journey of searching for oil. And after 5 long years of having many failed attempts, they struck gold in their 7th attempt by finding well number 7, which we call here as well the Prosperity well. One of the first oil wells was discovered here in Saudi Arabia that produces oil in commercial capacity. Some other important date that is related to Saudi Aramco. In 1943, The American oil venture renamed itself Arab American Oil Company. That company had huge discoveries and grew very quickly. That in 1976, it became one of the first companies in the world to produce 3 billion barrels a year. That is a lot of crude oil. And then in 1988, it became Saudi Aramco that we know today, fully owned by the kingdom, taking all of Aramco's responsibility. Now the company has more than 50,000 employees and more than 250 oil wells here in the country. So now I want to move on and talk about a different topic. I want to talk about where can we actually find crude oil. We know that it's under the ground, but where exactly? That's why I want to talk about these beautiful rocks that we have here displayed in our wall. As you can see, we have 4 types of rocks. They all seem different from the outside, but they're also different from the inside. So what do I mean by different from the inside? I'm talking about the porosity level. See, what do I mean by pores? I mean the tiny holes that we might find in some of each rock. And when it comes to the porosity level, we have 3 different types of rocks. We have first the reservoir rock, and we have the source rock, and also we have the sea rock. But first, I want to talk about the source rock, which is the source of petroleum. So what I mean by the source of petroleum, this rock was formed from the remains of the microorganisms that lived in the past, and it slowly, gradually transformed into a solid rock. But of course, at the same time, the organic remains of this rock gradually transformed into petroleum. That's why scientists are telling us that this oil-rich rock is the source of petroleum. Moving on to the reservoir rock that we have in here, if you want to take a closer look at it. This rock that we have, the reservoir rock, also has some pores, but functions differently than the source rock. As I said, that the source rock is the source of petroleum. This rock is not the source of petroleum, but how does it work exactly? It's like a sponge, sucks in the oil that seeps into it from a nearby source rock. That's why we call it actually the reservoir rock, because the oil gets filled inside of its pores and it gets accumulated like a reservoir. Moving on to the third type of rock that we have in here, which is called the seal rock. Come on, if you want to take a closer look at it, take a closer look at the details. This rock has no pores, so there's no fluid can actually go through it. So let's imagine together. We know that the oil is trapped underneath the ground. The seal rock, what keeps it underground. That's why we have to use drill bits and the drilling process to penetrate these rocks so we can reach out to the source rock and the reservoir rock where oil can be found. So I want to move on to a different display that we have and play a little game that might help us a little bit explain the different types of rock that we have here. Actually, I just want to play this game with you guys. I just want to test if you guys were focusing with me today or not. So we have here 3 different containers. Let's imagine that we have 3 different types of rocks with different pore sizes. If you want to take a closer look, we have here the large size pores, we have the medium size pores, and we have the small size pores. And if you want to take a closer look a little bit inside, you can see that there is a fluid inside. Let's imagine that's petroleum, just for the sake of argument. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to flip these containers upside down, and let us watch and observe which one of them where the oil seeps a little bit faster than the other. So that can give us a clear definition of the different types of rocks and their porosity level. So guys, I'm going to give you 10 seconds. Please write down your answers down in the comment section. Let's see who gets it right in the first time. Okay? So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I hope you guys are ready. Let's start. It's a little bit heavier than I thought. Every time it surprises me. Come on, take a closer look. As you can see, the container that has the large pores where the oil swept a little bit faster than the other. You can see here in second place, we have the one with the medium-sized pores. And then lastly, at the third place, we have the one that has a small size pores. So basically, this is just a little game that we play here at the exhibit, so we can test our knowledge of the different types of rocks and their porosity level. How can they actually help us in the oil exploration process? Now I'm going to move on to our last segment of the show, where you guys can get the chance to ask me a question that is related to today's topic, basically a Q&A part. But before we start taking the question, I want to recap what I've just talked about today to help you out in remembering the question of today's show. So today, what I talked about today, I talked about the history of Saudi Aramco. I talked about the formation of petroleum. I talked about the geological changes that our planet went through. Also, I've talked also at the primitive use of crude oil and the different types of rocks that we have. So I hope you guys are ready. Please switch on your mics and cameras so we can start with the questions of the show. So, do we have our first caller today? Hello.
Hi.
Hi, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hi, you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Okay, my name is Jenna.
How are you, Jenna?
Good.
I hope you liked today's show, Jenna.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Thank you so much. Do you have a question for us today, Jenna?
Yeah. Does crude oil come from dinosaurs?
Great question, Jenna. There is actually a misconception that crude oil comes from dinosaurs, but actually crude oil takes much longer time for it to form. Even as I said at the beginning of the episode, it was formed from tiny microorganisms that lived millions and millions of years ago, even before the Jurassic period. But of course, there is a misconception that the crude oil came from dinosaurs. Actually, I used to be one of those people who thought crude oil comes from dinosaurs. But thanks, Jenna, for asking that question. That was a very interesting one.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do you have a caller? Hello. Hello. Hi, welcome to the show. Do you have a question for us today? Can you raise your voice a little bit? I have some. Hi. Hi, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience first? I'm sorry, I just have difficulties hearing you. You want to raise your voice a little bit? Okay, just to recap, now we're just having some technical difficulties with hearing the voice, but I just want to recap about today's episode. As I said, I talked about the formation of oil, the different types of rocks, and also the primitive use of crude oil. Do we have a caller right now? Hello? Hello, hi. Hello, welcome to the show. You want to raise your voice? Maybe switch on your mics. Hello, Magda. I'm having some trouble hearing you, Magda. I guess we're having some technical difficulties when it comes to the mic. Okay. Since that, okay, so what I'm gonna do right now, I wanna move on to something a little bit different since we have some spare time. I wanna go and move on to a challenge that we have here at the Energy Exhibit. This is a great interaction displays that gives you a couple of questions about, just in general, about the reservoir, the oil reserve in different countries around the world. So I wanna get the camera a little bit closer because we wanna check the question that comes out here on the screen. So we're gonna start the game. Okay, let's press English, of course. Just a little quiz. Okay, so which country produced the most crude oil in 1980s? As you can see here, we have here a couple of options. It starts with Algeria, Canada, China, former USSR, Saudi Arabia, Norway, UAE, United States, Venezuela, and West Germany. I'm gonna give you 5 seconds to guess, guys. Please write down your answer down in the comment section. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, I'm gonna have a quick guess. Since I love my country, I'm gonna say Saudi Arabia. No, the kingdom. No, the answer is not Saudi Arabia. So let me just reveal the answer, or let me just try again. Which country produced the most crude oil in 1980? I would say United States. Ah, wrong again. Okay, let me just reveal the answer. Former USSR. That's interesting. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Which country produced the most crude oil in 2010? Well, since we got USSR in the first one, let me just see if it's Russia. That is correct, Russia in 2010. Okay, so now we've just reached the end of our show. It's been really great and fun having you guys today. And I want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for tuning in today and for your participation as well. I want to thank you guys so much with the questions that you guys had today. Please don't forget to tune in next week. I hope you guys really enjoyed and learned from our show today. Please don't forget to tune in next week. My name is Abdullah Khirsani, and I'll see you guys next time.